So Brian, it's great to see you again, and thanks for joining me on stage for the interview here. Exabeam and Google go way back in terms of partnership, and you've been part of that relationship for a very long time. So I wonder if you could just tell everyone a little bit about your journey, sort of, and your role has evolved at Google, and most recently has changed. Just maybe by way of introduction, let everyone know where your journey's gone, and I think it's going to lead into some of the rest of our questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's super exciting to be here. So I've been working with Exabeam for going on 6 years now. I was the original executive sponsor from Google Cloud who engaged with the company, and we worked together to figure out how we can bring joint value to both our customer community and then sort of an exchange of value with each of our respective IP. And so we've been doing this together for a number of years now. Recently, I guess 120, 130 days ago or so, I switched roles and I moved into a global capacity where I look after all of our artificial intelligence portfolio across the world. What that looks like for any sort of emerging or large-scale company is trying to help the organization sing from the same sheet of music every single day in every single theater across every single type of customer. We found ourselves going out in the morning in EMEA and talking about AI in a way that was entirely different from the way we might be doing it here in the domestic US with a company of one size versus a company of another size. And so I was asked to come in and codify all of that, make sure that we're organized and delivering the same messaging, same value, same enablement to our teams so that they can reflect that out there in the field.
That's great. And so before we get into more of the AI side of it, I want to talk on the partnership piece for a second, right? So you see, the word gets thrown out there all the time, partnership. But when you look at where you get success in the field, right? So when we're with customers, you're with customers. Where do you see the partnership, or what are sort of those examples you see where the partnership really clicks and drives value for a customer?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I think there's, as you pointed out, there's often a really strong effort to bring organizations together. There's an enormous amount of complexity in the details, and lighting that up for the customer experience is very, very hard. Where I see it work really well, and I think we've exemplified this a number of different places, is one, you have to identify for your customer what is truly the better together story. Why do the two organizations matter together? Why is it not just enough to be independent and on your own out there? And I think we've got a tremendously strong story around that. The other thing is, I think, matching up ethos. I think we have a very similar way that we think about our customers. We put our customer first in pretty much everything that we do, and I think that aligns us really nicely in how we show up in the field. And then you've got to have, and I love some of the things that the prior two speakers pointed to, you've got to have demonstrative value. It's not enough to show up and tell a story. You've got to be able to point to real world examples of where we've done things for our mutual client base that allow us to really shine for them and allow them to extract value. And so those are just some of the examples of where I think we work really well together, and we've shown up nicely for our customer base.
Yeah, I've seen it. Just it's in creating the right relationships, being able to have access to the right people, and ultimately that's what drives execution, and that's what matters most, I think, for the customers. Right? There's a reason of why we're together.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we've done well is at every single level between the two organizations, we have connectivity, and we have the right connectivity. We have the right people talking, and we have a governance model where we're communicating on a regular basis about the right set of priorities and the right set of outcomes. And the last thing I'll tell you is, in partnerships like this, both parties have to lean in. I think oftentimes, as being such a large company, a lot of organizations come to us and just sort of assume we've got it all figured out and we're going to drive the whole thing. The reality is it takes two sides putting in the same level of energy and effort in order to make it work for the client. That's just the truth of it, I think.
Yeah, no, and that's a great transition into what you're trying to do now, right? With such an interesting and dynamic new area with Vertex AI. Clearly, there's so much hype around it, and maybe we'll start this outside of necessarily even security operations, but what should people know about AI, about generative AI? Where are you seeing, at least initially, in a pretty broad customer base? Where is the hype stopping, and is it actually getting to some early wins in terms of real value, not just prototypes and ideas?
So you think there's hype?
Maybe.
So it's a great question, and I think about this a lot.
Security people are skeptical by nature.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Look, I think at the end of the day, there's a couple of key principles that I continuously go back to. If the project that you're about to undertake is not going to in some way either sort of secure the fortress, save money, or make money for yourself, for your organization, then I think you're probably headed down a road to nowhere. And I actually worry oftentimes that we're going to wake up in 6, 9, 12 months, and there are going to be organizations all over the globe who say, I did these projects, I did 10 of them, 12 of them, 120 of them, and they didn't bring me a whole lot of substantive value. That's the hype, and I think there's a lot of that going on. So every time I meet with a board, every time I meet with executives, I try to remind them, this is no different than anything else in business. You've got to ground yourself in sort of the first principle of, does it in fact impact my organization in a way that is positive in terms of either generating money, generating revenue, or saving money? And I think that's kind of where the hype sort of begins and ends if you can answer those questions. In terms of what we're actually seeing bring value, I will also tell you, and you might be surprised to hear me say this because you'd think I'm going to want to tell a bigger story as the ambassador of Google. The reality is the majority of outcomes that we are seeing with customers are largely taking processes that existed long before we got excited about generative AI, bringing a generative AI lens to overlay on top of that process, and either pulling out substantially more data, making it more dependable, making it more efficient. Yes, it's throwing off value. There's no doubt about it. The real TAM, the real opportunity, the really big aha for me is going to be when we can go out and systematically go to our customer base and say, here's how we not only help you do the things I just described, but more importantly, here's how we help you help your customers at scale. That's where I think we unlock the revenue potential. I think we unlock the impact potential. I think that's where the world starts to really change. And there's examples of it happening, but I don't care which of the large AI providers you're talking to, nobody's doing that in a massively impactful way at scale every day, all day. Just because they don't tell you that, it's a whole different conversation, but I'm here to tell you that.
Very cool. Thanks, Brian. So maybe a little more on the technology side. I want you to maybe help people understand why a cloud-native approach to the technology of AI itself is likely to be the right answer in terms of whether it's on-prem or software deployed in cloud. It does seem like this technology space is ripe for the advantage of cloud computing, just like we talked earlier about security operations and the benefits it gets. But what are you seeing in terms of AI just being very nicely aligned with what cloud native and cloud compute supports?
Yeah, I think there's a couple dimensions to this. The first thing I would say is a modern stack provides agility. And since we're talking about sort of an evolution of technology that is still fairly ill-defined, I don't think any of us can say what's about to happen over the next 18, 24, 36 months. Right. Agility is really key in order for you to be able to sort of navigate and move around your business. And so a modern stack provides you that. I think that's really important. When you think about a public cloud provider infrastructure, though, the other thing you do is you get to sort of inherit all of that goodness that's already sitting in the stack, that's already proven, that's already battle tested. You don't have to go and sort of build that stuff for yourself. The other thing you get is, of course, the advantage of the innovation that provider can bring you, because all of the providers doing this have very deep pockets and are very focused on an innovation curve that meets their clients sort of where they are. And if you imagine, for example, like if you were to deploy your own stack entirely, how would you go do something like if we're going to use our own parlance, like take the Vertex platform and plug it into the BigQuery platform? I mean, imagine having to take that on entirely by yourself as opposed to leveraging the benefits that we would bring to you as one of the many CSPs that can do that for you. And so I think it's a lot about agility as we watch the market develop and evolve. And then as it starts to mature, perhaps there will be another important sort of component to what matters.
That's great. Maybe one last question, sure. just playing off of that. So Exabeam and Google, where again, long-standing relationship, lots of technical components. Now starting to spend time in the AI space together. That's not new for Exabeam, but new in how we're trying to leverage some of the capabilities from Google. So any early reads, just as you've seen our teams work together? We talked earlier about our hackathons and how quickly we were able to develop and get some new capabilities out to market. But any initial thoughts about some of that engagement? Because I know it's still all very new. We're one of lots of customers and partners you'd work with, but things you observed in some of those efforts this summer that we're working on together.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say that as I'm not a security professional, so for me, some of the things that I've been able to observe working with your team are frankly kind of mind-blowing. Like the level of depth and understanding of your craft and the level of depth and understanding of the marketplace in which you play in is frankly just overwhelming to somebody like me. And it really sort of speaks to the level of expertise that you were able to bring to our client base. So for me, that's been very impressive. You said it too. I mean, you all have been incredibly collaborative. I think we've managed to extract maximum value out of the joint portfolio that we sort of have stitched together, as well as the relationships that we have for our customers. But really just the level of depth of expertise has been unbelievable for me to observe, and it gives me an incredible amount of comfort to know that we're out there sort of depending on organizations like yours to help bring this to life for our clients. The last thing I'll say about this, and this is a little bit perhaps Google's selfish here, but I will just call it out. One of the things that your team does really well for us is you help contextualize my portfolio. So I have this massive portfolio of what people often just call enabling technology, and you contextualize it for our clients. You allow it to be about solving a real business problem, one that has a ton of gravity and one that really matters. And so you actually serve a really important purpose for me out there in the field as my thousands of sellers are running around engaging clients, trying to understand how to bring it to life for them. You enable that for us.
That's fantastic. Brian, thank you very much, and thank you to Google for the partnership.
Thank you.